Judging by the 95.5% male viewership of this show, sadly I'm not making up those figures at all, I am willing to bet that you are the car guy of your group of friends. And for the 4.5% female viewership, thank you for watching. Either way, serious question for you. When was the last time you were chatting over like dinner with a group of friends and one of them asked you about a Jaguar? Or here's another scenario for you. When was the last time you suggested a friend of yours to not buy, just at least go look at a Jaguar? Even for a car nerd that knows everything about anything on four wheels, I made you think there, didn't I? Which is exactly the reason why Jaguar made a significant amount of changes to all things cars. Not crossovers, cars. A novel idea, wouldn't you say? And the first change they made was to put a bullet in the head of one of their cars. That would be the XE, the smallest one that no longer exists, which makes this, the four-door they offer, the XF. Now, for the avoidance of doubt, this is not an entirely new vehicle. It is a heavily updated vehicle. So that means all of the bits underneath are kind of the same, like the platform or the double wishbones in the front, multi-link in the rear, or the choice of all-wheel drive or rear-wheel drive. Then they make some changes to the engines. Now, previously, one could have different engines. Now, the only thing you can have is a turbocharged four-cylinder that is on offer in two different flavors. There's something called a P300, and that is 246 horsepower and 269 pound-feet of torque, and that is on offer as rear-wheel drive. Then there's this one, the P300. This is like the one with all the power, 296 horsepower, 295 pound-feet of torque, on offer only as all-wheel drive. In either case, the only transmission that one can have is an 8-speed torque converter automatic. Then there's the fuel economy, and here, being it's a four-cylinder, very respectable, 22, 30, 25 combined. And that's for the more powerful P300 version, which brings us to the performance figures. 0 to 60 of this all-wheel drive turbocharged four-cylinder is 5.8 seconds, and VMAX is electronically limited to 155 miles an hour. A four-door Jaguar, something you and I have not driven in an incredibly long time, but wherever it's from, it's lighter than something from Germany, 3,845 pounds, or depending on you express your weights and measures, 1,744 kilograms. Now, something rather important to point out, this car with the all-wheel drive is about 200 pounds heavier than the two-wheel drive version of this same thing. With that, dynamic mode. Oh, quite a delay there. Hit about 2,800 RPM, and it starts to come alive. Oh yeah, once you get above 3,000, maybe 3,500 RPM pulse, all the way up to 5,500, maybe 6,000, there is a good amount of power coming out of this engine. I can't honestly tell you it doesn't feel like a four-cylinder. It certainly does, one with quite a bit of power. God, this thing is kind of fun around these curves. There's enough of a leash to almost let you get the rear end out a little bit. God, this is good. This is unusually good. The transmission, it works unusually well with this engine. If you may remember, we had the same transmission, the 8-speed torque converter automatic, the ZF, which we've experienced in all of those BMWs, and it works better in the BMWs. In the F-Type that we drove, it wasn't as great. Here, I'd say it's better paired with this engine, surprisingly. Anyway, back to that engine, I do have to say you really do need to get very mature in the rev band to get power out of this, to make it do this kind of stuff. It sounds good while it's doing it. It's just missing something. It's missing that edge, and you can imagine it's just probably 2 or 4 extra cylinders would fix all of that. Now it's you and I jump into driving dynamics, and here something jumps out at me that hasn't jumped out at me in a long time, at least with a rear-wheel drive based all-wheel drive car, and that is I can feel the torque going to the front wheels. I honestly don't know the torque split here. I don't know if it's one of these 80-20 or it's continuously variable. Either way, you definitely feel the torque in the front wheels, meaning through the steering, you can feel the wheels are doing two different things. They're fighting. We're gonna steer. No, we're gonna drive the car. No, we're gonna steer. And that's unusual. You don't feel that nowadays, at least anything from Deutschland. I don't know how they've tuned this. It's probably a tuning thing, and as such, the steering feels different. It's not that it feels bad. It's direct, there's good feel to it. I'd say it could use a little bit more weight, but it's good. It's just, you feel the torque, and my guess is you probably wouldn't get that in the two-wheel drive version of this car, but then again, the two-wheel drive version has, what, 50 less horsepower. So torque splits aside, let's get back to the regular business of driving dynamics. God, you could make this thing a bit tail happy. That's unusual, A, for an all-wheel drive car, and B, for something that's 4 cylinders, even with a turbocharger. But first, an admission. I have never driven an XF before. Never, like not with the ones that had more power, only this new one here, and I gotta tell you, it's quite a strong platform. I mean, you can feel how good the platform is. Kumo and I were doing the B-roll of all the car underneath it, and it's more attractive underneath than it is up top. Granted, we're geeks about that kind of stuff, but I can see where it really pays dividends here. There's good control over most planes of motion. Mostly what you understand is that extra length, because this is kind of a 5 Series E-Class competitor, so wheelbase is kind of around that area, as that you feel the length, so you feel a bit of pitch more towards the ass end of the vehicle, because it's not trying to be a full-fat AMG, it's not trying to be a full-fat M car, but it's still trying to give you some control, kind of like the British stiff upper lip. What's most amazing to me, a newcomer to an XF, is the age of the platform. This thing has been around for an incredibly long time, so I didn't really expect it to be this good. So I really wanted to distill why is it this way, and the only answer would be the strength of the platform. Jaguar's been using aluminum in their construction for a very long time, and we could tell that in the weight of the vehicle. Clearly, this being, what, 400 or 500 pounds lighter than an equivalent German car. Now, for the avoidance of doubt, this thing is not as good as 5. It's not as good as an E-Class in terms of getting aggressive. Let me put driving dynamics to you in a bit of a different way. It's good. It's not great. The reason why it's good is because it has that stability from a much stronger foundation. The reason why it's not great, it's missing out on some of the bits that one would expect von Deutschland. Yes, it is indeed that time again to play your favorite game on the Absence Game with today's contestant, something I do not believe we have ever featured in a round of this game, a Jaguar with 4 doors. This one, the 2021 Jaguar XF P300 R Dynamic, still not done with a name yet, SE all-wheel drive for a base price of $49,995. Now, I do feel it prudent to point out that if this were the P250, the one with the lower output 4-cylinder turbo engine and the 2-wheel drive, it would be significantly cheaper, $7,000. Now, we do need to talk about some changes on the outside of the vehicle to complement some of the changes we talked about underneath the vehicle. The biggest by far is the front of the car. The grille, it still kind of looks like Ian Callum era Jaguars, which is to say a good thing, but the lights, I'm kind of sucker for light signatures, and here they do something that plays on the actual name of the car. It's a Jaguar with a J, so if you look at the lights, does that look familiar to you? Anyway, let's press on to the color of the vehicle. Of course, it's got to be British racing green, which is stunning. Got to see this thing in the daylight. And it's only $600. I'd say that's a bargain. Now, as we've discussed in many rounds of this game, it ain't just the exterior color that makes or breaks the car. It's the proper selection of the interior color that contrasts with the proper selection of the exterior color. And in this case, someone has indeed made the proper selection. It's called Light Oyster, and specifically the option is Windsor leather sports seats for $800. I would say money well spent. Then the convenience package, odd considering this is a $50,000 car, soft closed doors, rear sunshade and activity key, and then I believe there's a gesture control for the sunshade of the interior. That is $1,000. Then the extended leather upgrade. This drastically changes the color and trim, but more importantly, the tactile feel of the interior of this vehicle. Hugely important but expensive, $1,800. Then the cold climate package, which is the heated windscreen, the heated steering wheel, and heating on the headlight washer nozzles for $700. Then the dynamic handling package. This is the adaptive dynamics as well as the spoiler. I'd say this is an important thing considering this is almost 300 horsepower, $1,350. Then the Meridian sound system. Like in the F-Type episode, these are kind of a bargain and they kick, especially when you consider this one's only $600. And that brings us to the wheels. Yes, they are 20 inches in diameter, but they have a very odd name, Style 5036. Did they get that from Blade Runner? Either way, they're finished in gloss dark gray. I would say just a regular aluminum, especially considering the color of the car would really pop, $1,200. Then the clear sight interior rear view mirror for $450. Then an option that I am a complete sucker for, the head-up display, $1,050. Really, why is that optional on almost $50,000 car? I really got to ask that question. Then the adaptive cruise control, also, why is that optional on a $50,000 car? $1,200. Then the natural burr ash veneer. This, along with the extended leather, makes the interior pop in this car, and that's really what this update is about. Yeah, they changed the exterior and some of the engine offerings, but the interior, it's a big difference, and I'd say the $400 spent here really add to it. Then the only other thing you and I have to add is the destination and handling from Castle Bromwich, United Kingdom for $1,150 for a total retail price of $62,695. Even though you and I haven't driven a Jaguar sedan in a very long time, it doesn't mean I didn't keep up with the brand. I'm still a car guy and I love getting in and out of cars at car shows and checking things out. So when the XF first came out, of course I was excited to see it because I really do like mid-size European sports sedans. Outside, I thought it was attractive. I thought Ian and the team did a wonderful job. It's understated. To me now, it's still kind of dated at this point. Could use an update, which I'm sure they'll do at some point. But then there was the interior, and there's really no other way to put it. The interior on the original XF was terrible. The build quality was awful. The use of the plastics that translated into bad tactile feel, and then the infotainment system looked like it was ColecoVision. This is a drastic difference, and this is really what the folks at Jaguar were trying to go after, was make it a better place to be on the inside, and they've done that. The design is magnificent, and usually I do not like tacked on screens, but this screen, yes, it's tacked on, but in a very subtle, I guess, British way, understated. But notice, it's not a flat screen. The reason why it works is because it's concave, not convex, and it works with the overall organic shape of the dashboard. And that brings us to the most important update of the interior, which would be the tactile feel, because that was the weak point of the previous car. And here, I don't feel qualified to give you a definitive answer. The car you and I are driving is magnificent on the inside, but the reason why it's magnificent, it has about $3,500 in interior upgrades to make it magnificent, specifically the better seats and the extended leather, which goes a long way to make the interior so much nicer on this vehicle. However, getting beyond those pieces, I can tell somewhat lower in the interior, the tactile feel ain't great, the grade of materials ain't great, but it's definitely an improvement over other Jaguars that we have seen throughout the years. So let's put a pin in this conversation and come back to it after we see something that doesn't have all these fancy options. Then there's the integration of the UX system. It's the same one that we used in the Defender, which is to say a very good thing. It's a little bit slow and clumsy, trying to do very simple things like changing the radio stations. However, there's some very intelligent use of knobs and buttons. Like, for example, here I am driving very aggressively on the road here. Let's say I want to change the fan speed. All I got to do is pull this here and I move it up here. But then let's say for the sake of discussion, I want to change the temperature. Again, while I'm driving somewhat aggressively, I can do that. Same exact knob, but I don't have to pull or push anything. That changes the temperature. Let's say I want to turn on and off the heated or cooled seat. All I got to do is the same knob, but push it and it adjusts the cooling and heating of the seat. This is the kind of simplicity I like to see in UX design, because this is what translates to driver safety. Now, everything in here is not puppy dogs and roses. The steering wheel, while incredibly attractive, it does have like the capacitive touch, haptic feedback, whatever you want to call it, on some of the buttons for the steering wheel control. Thankfully, They do have a thumb wheel for the volume over here as well as here. And they do some other things that, I have to say, Jaguar, they're unusually good at some of the pageantry. Like, for example, the mode control switch, it's not buried in a menu here or here. It's this big chunky knob over here, which is easy to access. And then while you and I are on the topic of pageantry, we do need to discuss the shifter paddles. They are aluminum. They have the plus and minus kind of razored through it. They are rather large, not quite R35 GTR size, but they are good. Wish they were attached to the steering column, not the steering wheel. And that brings us to one final tidbit about the interior. And this I wouldn't file under pageantry. I would file this underneath historical significance, but not of Jaguar, rather Land Rover. Remember the Defender we drove? And it had that unusual, like, neoprene type interior. It was just on the dash and the door panels, and it was this unique, it had this rugged feel to it, but it worked in a Defender. Well, they've got that here. No, not on the seats, not on the doors. It's on the shifter. But to balance that out, they have given a historical nod to the folks in Coventry, meaning Jaguar, all over the vehicle. They have this established, I think 1935, Jaguar Coventry, and they even put it on the sides of the seat. That is a design touch that was clearly stolen from the folks in Gothenburg, excuse how I pronounce that, how they put the Swedish flag on the side of the seats in the Volvos. Well, now they have it for Jaguars. Instead it says Coventry, not a blue and yellow flag. This is good. In fact, it is significantly better than I thought it would be. Yeah, it could use a bit more power, and I'd love a rear drive only option with a higher horsepower engine. But let's put that aside because we got bigger fish to fry. I'm still struggling with the statement from the top of this episode. I, as a car guy, would have a hell of a hard time saying to a friend of mine, yeah, you should buy a Jaguar. It's a great car, but I don't know who would buy this over a 5 Series. Over an E-Class, or get this, over a CT5. This can do what those cars can do, but the 5, the E, even the Cadillac is a bit sharper than this. And that brings us to the wish list. And there, I got nothing specific for a car that is highly competent. Rather, it's the future direction of Jaguar. And we all kind of know where this is going. They haven't made it a secret. They're going all electric, which is fine and good, but in today's day and age, that's not enough. You need to do electric and then something else. Like, for example, you and I just looked at the Hyundai Ioniq 5. That's electric, but it's also this like retro hot hatch look with this cool high-tech interior, and it's something different. That's what Jaguar needs to be thinking. I personally think Jaguar should be shocking the market like they did in the late 40s with the XK series. What they did there was made something that was not only fast and something that was achingly beautiful, but it was a pleasant place to be on the inside. No one else offered any combination of that back in the day. That's what Jaguar should be thinking about on top of an electric platform. Maybe not a 2-seat convertible, but something along those lines with those attributes. And this is the point of the episode where I turn this around to you guys to opine in the comments below, especially this one because this is a big topic, or via our social media, MOTOMAN TV, all one word, MOTOMAN TV, all one word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And with that, I will give them one more suggestion. How about clones of the XK150S we have in this hangar here? In that beautiful red, just in electric, that would be very reliable because I really don't like getting underneath that car on the side of the road, which I have done many times. Until I see you in the next episode, bis später.